Ukraine, first of all, just not fighting now for its own survival. We are fighting on the front lines of the global battle for justice, truth, and responsible use of technologies.
Welcome to the Lawyering Peace interview series, where we explore the art of diplomacy and the legal frameworks that underpin peace processes. You're listening to our special series focused on peace negotiations and peace building in Ukraine. Join us as we hear from prominent figures who have played pivotal roles as lawyers, negotiators, and diplomats in the quest for peace. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Williams, the president and founder of the Public International Law and Policy Group, and the Rebecca Grazier Professor of Law and International Relations at American University. Today, we will delve into the critical issue of wartime cybersecurity threats, and particularly those generated by artificial intelligence and cyber warfare in Ukraine. We'll examine how malicious actors spread disinformation, the strategies employed to counter those threats, and the legal and ethical frameworks governing emerging technologies and autonomous systems during conflict. I am so excited and so honored today to welcome Dr. Anna Mysyshyn to the program. Welcome to the program, Anna.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for your invitation. And it's an honor to be here and to talk for searching for the questions and topics to cover them.
I'm really excited to have this conversation. As our audience knows, I'm from Cupertino, California. And although I fled California to become an East Coast lawyer, all of my childhood friends are deeply engaged in AI, cyber issues, cybersecurity out there in the Bay Area. So I'm excited to learn a lot, so I have something to talk to them about during our next get together. Well, for our audience, let me give you a few words of background about Anna. She is a Ukrainian lawyer, a Ukrainian legal scholar, and an expert in digital governance, disinformation, and the ethics of artificial intelligence. She is the founder and the head of the NGO Institute of Innovative Governance, which develops policy solutions and digital tools to strengthen democratic resilience and counter digital authoritarianism. She has also been a research fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States, focusing on the application of advanced technologies in the war in Ukraine. Now, her work critically examines how generative AI, deepfakes, and voice cloning technologies has transformed the landscape of information warfare. Anna has contributed to initiatives aimed at enhancing media literacy and developing technological solutions to detect and to counter AI-generated propaganda. So there's so much to discuss today with you, Anna. Let's jump right in. Your work spans academy, civil society, digital governance during one of the most technologically complex wars in modern history. Tell us a little bit about how you came to focus, to think about, to ponder questions relating to the intersection of law, technology, public service, and how has your role evolved since the full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine?
Thank you for this wonderful and personal question. And yeah, I'm a lawyer by profession, but from very early on, I realized that law on its own is not enough to meet the challenges of this modern world. So after completing my master's degree at Tartu University in Estonia, a country known for this innovative digital governance, I was incredibly inspired, honestly. And studying cybersecurity and new technologies opened my eyes on how digital tools can transform the society and for the better. So when I returned in Ukraine in 2017, I wanted to bring that inspiration home. And therefore, I founded organizations, the Institute of Innovative Governance at the time. And And at the time, the same, Ukraine didn't have the Ministry of Digital Transformation yet. Therefore, we became like a small Ministry of Digital Transformation ourselves. We started by developing e-governance tool, creating apps to promote human rights, web accessibility, and e-democracy. And at the same time, I pursued my PhD in law, but again, I couldn't separate law from technology. And I was deeply influenced by a British think tank and like a British professor, Richard Susskind, and especially his book on online courts and the future of justice. So I was inspired, and that led me to the focus of my PhD on how AI can and emerging technologies can accelerate the recognition and enforcement of foreign judicial awards in Ukraine. So I had this intersection between law and technologies from that time because I saw like, well, this is the future and we need this. But then the war started the full scale in 2022. The importance of technologies became even more obvious, especially as it coincides with the rise of the generative AI like ChatGPT and all open AI tools. And since then, my role evolved from building long-term digital resilience in Ukraine and first of all, to defend our informational space, fight disinformation, secure the digital systems, and ensure that we don't lose the sight of the human rights and democracy during the wartime and this innovation. So that was interesting way from the legal profession to work in this intersection of law and technology.
Well, and it sounds like you started on a path of optimism. How do lawyers use artificial intelligence to be better, faster, stronger on behalf of their clients, to enforce awards, dealing with matters in Ukraine, arbitral awards and others. But then all of a sudden, you've pivoted to the defense as AI has been used by nefarious actors, the Russian parties, as an additional dimension of their kinetic war of aggression against Ukraine. Can you walk us through a little bit what the Russians are doing in terms of disinformation and how they're utilizing AI generated disinformation to impact the battle space?
Yes, definitely. And unfortunately, this is very real and growing threat we are seeing in Ukraine right now. And already in 2022, 2023, the Institute of Innovative Governance at my organization, we launched the first pioneering project in Ukraine, specifically focused on the analyzing of AI-generated disinformation. And we systematically studied how deepfakes videos, voice cloning, and AI-generated content being produced and spread through the different and various platform, entertaining platform that we are now seeing, like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere, and where it can quickly reach the millions and to reach the target of Russians to manipulate public opinion and to erode public trust. So since the full-scale invasion, we've seen like these deepfake videos of President Zelensky, of former General Zaluzhny, and trying to demoralize population and to spread those fake narratives and stories. So, and this is really particular and dangerous to see how AI tools now are used by these threat actors to manipulate this public opinion during war. And this is a level of the psychological manipulation we simply hadn't experienced before at the time. So therefore, we started this work to secure and to protect our cyberspace in Ukraine and also in other countries from those AI-generated deepfakes and manipulative narratives that Russian actors being used. And even before the full-scale invasion, what is interestingly, Russia already invested more than $9 billion to the false narratives and manipulated news. But it wasn't with AI-generated tools appeared in 2022. So now it's when they before invested more than $9 billion into false fake news through this traditional media. So now we can see how it's easy to to use and disseminate all the AI generated and fake news. So, and now what is really interestingly, and we've been discovering with our Ukrainian partners, Russia has its own large language model similar to OpenAI. We call it Pravda. And maybe you heard about this or not, but it's designed to mass produce AI generative disinformation in many languages. And recent investigations showed that this fraud network, it disseminated millions and even billions of Kremlin narratives across all the internet. And even ChatGPT, if you're searching for the information, it provides you resources from that fraud network and AI generated by Russian narratives, which is a real threat. And there's like lots of misleading information in the internet right now from that source. And by doing this, they are targeting and they aim to manipulate the outputs of large language models that we all use. So that is really dangerous. And we see this, how these technologies are really like, how these technologies pose a real threat now to the society. And it's not just in Ukraine, but in other countries.
So they've basically gotten rid of the troll farms, and now they have a supercomputer hack generating all of this misinformation.
In all the languages, possible languages. So you can have a prompt in like 20 languages and it generate massively lots of articles and narratives. So across the internet.
Well, and that raises a number of questions that I want to jump in with you on so that our audience can get their head around this. What are some of the types of deep fakes or narratives? You know, when you have a government spokesperson, they say, this is our view, we're good, they're bad, duh. But when you're deep faking somebody else, are they subtle? Or they're having the individuals that they deep fake say something 180 degrees, or they're catching them in awkward social moments? If they're going to deep fake, what do they do?
Oh, yeah, with deepfakes now, that's a really important question. And especially since I will start a little bit of some of the examples of the deepfakes that we had since the full-scale invasion. Examples emerged in March 2022. It's connected to war, and we saw this manipulated version of the President Zelensky announcing Ukraine's supposed surrender, which was like a deepfake video, and it was even also it was quickly debunked, this video. During the minutes, it demonstrated that it created a confusion and fear among the society, especially vulnerable groups of population, because it's not easy for them to distinguish the real video from the deepfake video, especially now when it's evolved and with all the new technologies. Later, we had another deepfake videos in 2023. I think it's a video of our former Ukraine's commander-in-chief, General Valery Zaluzhny. It also not just used the actors, the malicious actors. They didn't use just a video. They had a combination of a deepfake video with the voice cloning. There is a technology like 11 Labs where you can provide a voice of me, you, or anyone else, like just 2 minutes of our voice to clone the voice with the same intonation and even accent if you do have. So it's this combination of the video and voice cloning, and it's really easy to create this fake image of general or a president or any other high official. And it had and still has a real psychological impact despite being proven false. We had some other cases connected to war and with high officials. It was example of a fake voice, a call impersonating other former president Petro Poroshenko. And the president, he targeted the former UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron. So this impersonators used the voice cloning to engage Cameron in the call under the false pretenses. So the aim was to manipulate the high-level conversation and to get the information, some secret information from the former UK Foreign Secretary. Luckily, And they understood it wasn't Petro Poroshenko. But still, we can imagine how dangerous this technology can be, especially when you're calling someone you don't know, like who's real, is it a real person or not? And we see all these deepfake videos, they are spreading among social media. And our young generation that use TikTok or Facebook, Instagram, they are consuming this content and they don't fact check this information and double check it. They don't know how to use the technologies that can check and if it's a deepfake video or not. It's still difficult to do. Now when technology is evolving, it's super difficult for companies to develop something to check and to understand if it's a fake video or not. In 2022, it was quite easy for experts to understand if it's a fake video or not, but now it's more it's complicated.
And let me pick up on that. There's two questions that arise from that. The first is, what is your general advice to people for what their mindset should be now and moving forward in consuming TikTok or Instagram or Facebook? You know, we scroll through, we watch the happy cat videos, and then we watch the funny dog tricks, and then all of a sudden we get some deep fake propaganda. And we're in this mood of trusting an association and affinity with our TikTok stream or whatever stream we're on. And then it slides right in there. How should they be approaching it in a mindful way? And then I want to ask about the technology as a second question.
Wow, yeah, that's a good thing. If you're asking about advice for them, so I mean, in the early stages of the AI-driven disinformation campaigns, we have been actively involved in training journalists, civil society organizations, and public officials on how to detect AI-generated disinformation and strengthen critical thinking and fact-check content effectively. So my first advice that I usually like give to all the young journalists, to public officials, to everyone actually is to have this critical thinking, to not to trust everything you see and consume from the internet because there are lots of fakes and lots of disinformation. So if you see something, especially which is really emotional, because what is like a deepfake video for? It's to public trust. It should be something that it's trigger your emotions, something that gives you this false narrative of the president or the of public officials, usually about something. Usually the actors, for example, they use some hashtags like corruption or like the commenter that gives bribes or they are all corrupted or the other high officials are corrupted. So it's very, very emotional. If you see something like this, double check, go to the official website and to check if it was really officially from some representative from the government, even someone from government. Be usually critical, have this critical thinking and know the fact-checking tools, double check the information. This is the simplest and real good advice for everyone because since technology is, as you said, evolving so fast, it's not easy to double check if it's a deepfake or not, but be critical and better to go to different resources and open different like links, I mean, in terms of articles and to check where this information come from. Is it the true information or it's false?
No, that's actually great advice. I'm new to Twitter, or I guess X, and I'll scroll through, and then every once in a while I'll be reading something and I'll be lightly triggered, or you start to get this sense of outrage. This is great advice to be like, well, take a beat. You know, if it's not the happy cat videos or the funny dog videos, and you're starting to feel an emotive reaction to the news, take a beat and validate it before forwarding it to my 6 followers on Twitter with comments, with outrageous comments. That's really helpful because I think you and I and our colleagues and friends and our listeners are all going to face an ever increasing wave of deepfakes, voiceovers, false news. On the technology end, is technology catching up? There's technology to create deepfakes and voiceovers. Is there parallel technology to be like, yeah, red check mark instead of a blue check mark when these things pop up?
Oh, that also a question. a difficult one because we have lots of startups in Ukraine and I think in the US, in Europe, everywhere that's trying to check such deepfakes and mark them as they said red, blue, or red. But I've been talking to our colleagues that are checking deepfake videos, and what they said that developers and these criminals that like creating those deepfake videos by using technologies, they understand, for example, that people realize that it's a deepfake videos in 2022 because the person who was on the video didn't blink. It was like a very straight gaze, and it was obvious that the person was like a robot. So they said, okay, to make it more natural, we need to add this blinking moment and to make the person like more like, with the natural features. Then the companies that had this detection, like, oh, if the video are not blinking, though it's a fake video, now the criminals, they got it, and now they changing videos and they make it better. So it's usually really difficult to be at the same pace with the technologies, and therefore we need to use, as I said, there are three recommendations. First, as I said, having this critical thinking and checking, because there are some tricks and how to detect the deepfake video. For example, usually you need to be really focused on what is behind the person on the video. Sometimes you will see very strange subjects. Even the person talking, like, I see you now, and you have a really nice background with the bookshelves. And if it's a fake video, I could see on the background very strange artifacts. So because the technology is now, as I said, can hallucinate even in the videos. Also, what we recommend for governments and civil society is to negotiate and cooperate with AI technological companies who is creating such tools for deepfake videos to have a watermarks, to give this video watermarks so you can create this deepfake, but then the audience, the people and users who see the video will see that this video was created by this AI tool that's not real. So to have the watermark would be super helpful. But again, it should be the cooperation between the government and companies.
Well, Anna, let's pick up on that. Let's talk about something you mentioned a few moments ago, which is that even ChatGPT is hoovering up or absorbing some of the Prava deepfakes that's coming out. Well, what is your sense of trust or optimism about companies like ChatGPT or OpenAI dealing with this effectively? And I ask this, although I'm from Cupertino, I'm deeply suspicious and deeply antagonistic towards Facebook and Instagram, who just shrug their shoulders. They're used as a platform to amplify disinformation, genocidal propaganda against Rohingya and Burma and places like that. And they just shrug their shoulders and say, we're immune from litigation. Do you get a sense that there's a deeper responsibility among those that are at OpenAI or starting other LLMs, or that there may be even I know I'm packing a lot into this one question, so it's not really fair, but is there a change of the ethos and the ethics of Silicon Valley that they have to start taking this seriously? And are they technologically capable of doing so?
Oh, that's not easy. Of course, we understand this company and their prior like goal. Not that prior, but to be honest, they want to get money for this for the AI tools they are developing. And of course, if you're talking about ethical part, yeah, they should comply with ethics and norms, and we need more regulations and norms for such companies, especially if it goes to this such a sensitive disinformation campaigns that can be used and this technology can be used for. And I think that what they did is that, yeah, to put this disclaimer in, for example, at OpenAI, when you talk about disinformation, for example, they have all, please check information because disclaimer, there can be disinformation. So I think it's not enough, of course, just to put the disclaimer, and they should comply with ethics and norms, but at the same time, they need this balance between complying with that and to being progressive with technologies and to be able to develop those tools, because we can use technologies for both like bad things and good things. So if you're talking OpenAI, yes, everyone is using now OpenAI tools, and it can assist us with lots of tasks. But at the same time, it can be used by criminals, as I said, for many purposes, from deepfake source cloning and even to the malicious cyber campaigns that probably we can talk later. So, I mean, we need regulation, but I think it's a very complex and a very long way to do it, especially when we're talking now. That's my opinion again. In EU, we have lots of regulations. We have AI Act now. We have Digital Service Act. We have lots of regulations for technologies and companies. When we're talking about the other companies that are in the US and in China, so do they have so many regulations? Because if you regulate too much, then it's too little for innovation. So it's again a competition between those companies. Every company has to be faster and better. And if it's regulated a lot, that's for them, it's a slower the process of this. So it's an interesting question.
They're trying to balance their profit versus innovation versus ethics versus guarding against doing real and genuine harm. Well, you did mention infrastructure. Let's dive in on infrastructure. Now, today, the very day we're having this conversation, most of Spain and most of Portugal has been plunged into darkness. It's not clear whether this was a cyber attack or somebody pulled the wrong switch or unplugged the wrong thing. But seeing how fragile the electrical grid of two countries, it's pretty shocking. We know from day one that the Russians have been aggressively cyber attacking the infrastructure of Ukraine. Talk to us a little bit about that. I think there was an aggressive attack. It didn't have much impact because I think Ukraine had hardened, whatever that means, its computer system and its infrastructure. But kind of help us look into the window of that dimension of the battle space in Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine.
I love this question. Thanks. Even like mentioning now the Spain and the power grid, it reminded me, I just started watching this TV show, The Zero Day. It's the first episode. It's almost same. But yeah, we're talking about cybersecurity issues. I think it's important to see the full context of Ukraine's cybersecurity journey, because it just hasn't started. It's like since full-scale invasion, but way before. And the full-scale invasion in 2015, we suffered from the first ever confirmed cyber attack to take down the power grid using that black energy malware. And that in 2017, we had non-petty attack. And this again attributed to Russian actors like a Sunward actor. It caused massive disruptions, not only in Ukraine, but globally, actually, and hitting the critical infrastructure, banks, airports, hospital, which is really like dangerous. So just before the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russia launched another serious wave of the cyber attacks, targeting the Ukrainian critical infrastructure in attempt to sow the chaos and weaken our defense before the physical aggression. And it was very strategic from them to do that. And while we analyzing since 2022 to, for example, last year in 2024, we had the statistics that Ukraine experienced like almost 70% surge in cyber attack in 2024, with more than 4,000 major incidents reported by our officials. And what is really interesting that last year, this nature of the cyber threats and attacks is being changing by the rise of the AI tools. As we mentioned in the AI, that AI in disinformation attacks, but this AI cyber-driven attack and the AI technology is now being weaponized, honestly. And we have some things that we didn't have before. We have AI-generated phishing emails that are far more convincing that just phishing emails. We have AI-based malware. We have tools that are for example, in the dark web, the criminals and Russian criminals using AI tools like WormGPT or FraudGPT that are being used for social engineering attacks. And what I can explain how it's some of the things. For example, interestingly, that those tools are not just using to attack the critical infrastructure, but now during war, when we are in the stage of this, we need to protect our national security. Russians are targeting other military personnel by using social engineering. For example, let's imagine we can use all the possible tools we have with AI right now to create the perfect social engineering attack. We can use, for example, how they do. They are analyzing the social media of the military personnel, if there is social media. They targeting the specific person, the soldier, for example. They are creating a deepfake video or voice cloning of someone he knows or could knew, and creating a fake Instagram account or Twitter or other social media account and start conversation like, oh, do you remember me? We studied at like 34 school in Kiev, number 34. My name is like, I don't know, Oleg, and maybe you not remember me, but we had this common friend because he did a social engineering, and he might created a voice clone, he might created a pictures like AI generated to have this trust from the military personnel. And then while chatting, they can get sensitive information. They can get the pictures, and with the OSINT tool that we have now, it's easier to get information where the person is located. They can get other sensitive information. So that is super dangerous right now if they using all the different AI tools for those phishing and social engineering attacks, even not just we're talking about malware and critical infrastructure, but this national security and personal. Therefore, that's evolved like really massively. And therefore, we are always talking about cyber hygiene, even for the military personnel and for every Ukrainian to know what tools are using by Russian actors and other actors to get this information. But if getting back, I'm talking a lot, sorry, but getting back from the bigger picture, then the war in Ukraine started the full-scale invasion. I mean, the Ukraine also moved critical governmental services to secure cloud platforms like Microsoft Azure or others, which protect from the physical attacks. And we get so much support from our international donors, from NATO, from the EU, from other countries to fight against cyber criminals. And even anonymous group that is really famous was in the very beginning. They helped us a lot with Russian cyber attacks and cyber criminals, and not only to protect ourselves, but also to use such tools to attack Russia in the cyberspace. But one more thing to add, I think maybe it will be important for everyone to know that Ukraine has been resilient, but it received support from donor funding. And for example, USAID provided a lot for our country's cyber resilience. And just because today this funding is ending, it's real concern to the Ukraine's critical infrastructure. And it's really more vulnerable, and simply because the cybersecurity protection is expensive and requires constant investment in the particular in wartime. That's important that we have this partnership, and we still have the partnership support for that critical to support the critical infrastructure. So it would be great if you have the continued support from other partners, because as you see, it's not just Ukrainian problem, it's problem all around the world, the critical infrastructure. So very complex question.
No, I appreciate your answer on that. It was bringing me back to my childhood when we all had, well, some of us had imaginary friends. This takes the imaginary friend to a whole new level and more like frenemies, imaginary frenemies than friends. No, it's deeply concerning. Let me ask you, and feel free to answer this question or not. Have you been pleasantly surprised at the level of competency and knowledge of your Western allies and fighting cyber attacks and dealing with cybersecurity? Or have you been, uh-oh, why haven't we been paying attention? Get it together, guys. Ukraine is a crucible where all of this is coming together, and Ukraine's done a phenomenal job. And you mentioned with help from your friends and allies. How do you rate the cyber competence of your friends and allies? And you can skip this question if you want, but I'm curious.
Well, there is no one answer because all the other partners different. And also, I can say that in Ukraine, before full-scale invasion, we still, and I'm being honest, sometimes we still underestimated the cyber threats and the cybersecurity, I mean, like in the government. So I mean, and in the world, also many partners and governments underestimated the how important to have the cyber resilience and cybersecurity. So now everyone thinks that's important things to have because it's, as I previously mentioned, that it's expensive to have. And if you, for Ukrainian case, and before getting to other partners, we are very well digitalized and developed in this terms of digital like development and having one application DIA in our phone that we can use all our documents in one application. So we want to develop the government things fast and to be number one in digital governance. But at the same time, if you're fast in developing applications, you're not thinking about cybersecurity because you need to be very careful and you need to have a strong cybersecurity system and resilience. You can develop fast applications, those both sides. So, and for international partners, I think we can learn from each other because they don't have so much digital e-tools in many countries as in Ukraine. And they learn from us too, how we developing things and how we are fighting with cyber attacks at the same time. So they learn from us, but they can also learn again, getting something from them because they are more slower. And maybe, that's also the thing to slow down a little bit in this term. So I can say if I can rate them, because all of them are different, but I definitely can say we can learn from them, but at the same time, we can teach them something. It's all about the cooperation.
That's interesting to hear because, yeah, there's different levels of engagement on cyber threats and proactive and utilization of cyber attacks, as you briefly mentioned. You've been very generous with your time. I just have two more questions. Anna, let's move into autonomous systems, either autonomous systems to generate on the offense deepfakes, voiceover, misinformation, but also kinetic, weaponized autonomous systems, drones that can do their own targeting, thinking, and then fire and forget. What are your thoughts on that rapidly evolving space?
Oh, thank you again for a question. And we've been discussing this question with many partners as now during war, the establishment of the unmanned system forces, autonomous systems, is a major and necessary step forward for Ukraine's defense. And given the scale of war and brutally of this war, many our people die in war. We need this to use all technological advancements and AI autonomous system to protect our people, our human beings from dying in this war. It's better machine to fight rather than people. It's the one thing. But at the same time, we are very conscious about this complex legal and ethical considerations that we have in this technologies race. And this is like a very interesting, like a blurred line between a military necessity that we have during war and the human rights. So to balance this military necessity with respect of human rights and international humanitarian law. And Ukraine, during wartime, first of all, we don't have the fully autonomous system right now. We have semi-autonomous, but we are thinking about that. Other partners thinking about the recent conversation we had in London. We've been talking about fully autonomous system. And we've been discussing how Russia, North Korea, they also try to develop that fully autonomous system. But the problem is that if Russia developing this fully autonomous AI system, they don't think about their human lives. They undermine international norms all the time. For them, it's like just to develop the system can kill everyone, including their own people. But for us, we need to comply with all the national and international standards. And if you talk about this international standards, they're thinking first of all about international humanitarian law and the principle of distinction, principle of proportionality. And that's an interesting question, because we need, if the system is fully autonomous and with not human control in the end, it's usually biased and not accurate. So it definitely will be targeting and can confuse the combatant with the civilian, for example. So it will be against the main principles. At the same time, the system can also harm people who are hostages, or like even like anyone on the field, just because it's biased and not accurate at all. So it's complicated question, but now we are more talking about semi-autonomous system where we still have humans involved. As we call it, we have this human in the loop, human out the loop. So it's important to understand who will be the first of all responsible for system. Is it failed? Is it the commander or it's the developer of the system? So the final decisions should be on a human, but it's for now, and for future, we don't know what to expect.
And let me tap into your academic perspective. Do you have a sense that international law, as it currently stands, adequately addresses those questions? Humans in the loop, on the loop, out of the loop. Where's the liability for any atrocity crimes or violations of the laws of war that might occur? And given what you and I both know about the development of international law through custom, treaties, and how long it takes, are you at all hopeful that international law can keep pace with the development of technology? Or look, our international law is pretty clear. This is what you can and cannot do, no matter how much the technology develops.
Oh wow, that's really interesting, because in my opinion, that international law, if you're talking about, for example, Geneva Conventions and the protocols, it's old. I mean, it's big, like honestly.
Older than I am, Anna.
And it being like when, we didn't have technologies, and of course it regulated like chemical weapons, and it's Article 36 we have in the Geneva Convention, as I recall. So, but it doesn't talk about the technologies, AI autonomous system. So I think that if you want to regulate the system and now living in this very changing environment, we need to adapt the law. And we need also new regulations, because unfortunately with this law we have, it is not clear. And we've been talking, I know there are lots of people in academia, they talking about new conventions, and I've been talking to my colleagues, and people think differently. One thing is International Red Cross and in the UN that, oh, we completely need to ban AI autonomous systems. From the Ukrainian perspective, I mean, during this war and difficult situation, we don't think it's like we need to ban something, because if we ban, other parties like Russia and countries like Russia, they will not ban, they will develop, and it will be worse. So we need to regulate it rather than ban. So definitely international law, as I said, is outdated, and we need to update it, especially if this of a clear to understand the human in the loop decision making, to understand the transparency and explainability, ensuring that AI systems are not the black boxes where no one understands how decision was made. That we've been talking, it's about the transparency of AI systems and the clear accountability, making sure who is responsible for the decisions. So it's also because we have NATO principles, we have principles like a responsibility, traceability, and reliability. I remember. So we have principles, but we also need to update the old law and maybe some new regulations to have. And in Ukraine, probably maybe you will ask with what we've been talking about national our regulations that we need to have right now. The best what we can have right now is to have this safe environments where we can test technologies, and to have the legal frameworks, including sandboxes, where the military AI technologies can be tested before in this control environment before deployment. So that's only one solution that is good for us to have right now, even don't have strict regulations. of the AI technologies. And I think it's a huge area developed by Council of Europe and methodology. No, it was developed by Alan Turing Institute and adopted by the Council of Europe that provides framework for addressing risks and impacts of AI systems on human rights, democracy, and rule of law. And it says about this control environments that we can have before deploying the AI systems.
Well, it's very appropriate for the Alan Turing Institute to develop that, given his role in breaking the enigma and the code and
Right.
one of those very first supercomputers. You've been so generous with your time. I have one last question. We've covered so many different topics and different dimensions of artificial intelligence. What I'd like to ask you to do is to leave our listeners with a sense of how they should think about artificial intelligence in a time of warfare. And I'll give you an example of what I don't mean. So I don't mean what they should think. Years and years ago, one of my friends, Brendan Sims at Peterhouse in Cambridge, said, Paul, you're engaged in the Balkans. How should I think about this? And I started to give him my talking points about, the genocide, Liechtenstein. No, don't tell me what I should think. What intellectual framework should I construct in order to do my own thinking about the conflict in Yugoslavia? So what intellectual framework should our listeners construct so how they can process information in the coming weeks, months, and years on AI and war?
Yeah, well, that's important. First of all, one message I wanted to say to the listener, which is not only about AI, but as a Ukrainian, just want to state that Ukraine, first of all, just not fighting now for its own survival. We are fighting on the front lines of the global battle for justice, truth, and responsible use of technologies. And I think it's also the Ukrainian lesson might be for our audience important that to how to think about the technologies and that technologies will definitely shape the future of war and this world, but the law, ethics, and the human values must shape those technologies. So we are living where everything is changing really fast and quickly. And we must be cautious about what we read, what we consume. We must use our critical thinking everywhere. Unfortunately or fortunately, but yes. But we must understand that even with those technological process and advancements, we need to think about ethics and human rights in the first place, and to think how we can use these technologies for good and not allowing the actors, the malicious actors, to undermine the human law by using those technologies. It's a very complex, but definitely we need this balance. Even like we understand it's very difficult to keep, but we need to keep in mind that we need the balance between technologies and human rights.
I think some of my friends have worried that the development of AI will replace the need for us to do thinking, that AI will think for us. And essentially what you're saying is, oh no, we have to double, if not triple, the amount of thinking that we do as we partner with AI as our thought partner, because it raises so many questions and complexities. That's a great intellectual framework to leave our listeners with. Well, Anna, it's been a real privilege to have this conversation. I love having conversations with people who know their brief backwards and forwards and upside down in every which way. You really know everything there is to know about AI and about its use during times of war. So thank you for taking this time this last hour to share your thoughts, your insights, and your passion and your ethical framework for dealing with questions of AI and conflict. It's been a real pleasure on my part.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking to you. It's really interesting and nice conversation. I'll be happy to talk to you again.
Well, I look forward to episode number 2.
Definitely. Thank you so much.